Today I'm making this wonderful savory Danubio with you. You're going to love it. Let's do it together. Let's get started. So first of all, I put the flour in a bowl. Then I add the fresh yeast, the sugar, the salt, the egg, and the milk. And I start mixing everything with a fork. Perfect. Once the dough has gained a bit of consistency, I put the fork aside and adding a little oil at a time, I start kneading with my hands. Once I have a nice smooth dough, I shape it into a ball, cover it with a cloth, and let it rise for at least 3 hours. By the way, I remind you that my two cookbooks are only available on Amazon. Just search for Carlo Gaiano and you'll receive them in no more than 2 days perfect. After at least 3 hours have passed, I divide the dough in half and from each half I make a nice long loaf. Once I have the two loaves, I cut pieces of about 35 1 1/2 ounces each. Then I flatten them one at a time, fill them with ham and cheese, close the edges, form a ball, and then place the balls in a buttered mold or one lined with parchment paper. And then, once I've put them all in, I cover them with a cloth and let them rise in a warm place for at least an hour. Okay, after at least an hour has passed, I brush them with egg yolk and milk, then put them in a preheated oven and bake for 30 to 35 minutes in static mode at 180 degrees Celsius. And so, let's see. Oh my, if you want to impress everyone at the table, make these baked tagliatelle nests with me. They're delicious. Let's get started. So, first of all, in a large pan or skillet, I add some extra virgin olive oil. Then I put in a few cloves of garlic cut in half, and once they're golden, I remove them. I add the sausage and let it brown over high heat for 5 to 6 minutes. 6 minuti. Perfect. Now I add the peas. Then I add the tomato puree and I thin it out. Add salt and let it cook for about 20 minutes over medium-low heat. Now in a small saucepan I melt the butter, then I add the flour, start stirring, and once I have the roux I add the milk. I add a bit of nutmeg, a bit of salt, a bit of pepper, and let it cook for 5 to 6 minutes, stirring constantly until it thickens. Good, perfect. Now I combine the bechamel sauce with the other sauce, mix well, then put a few ladles of the mixture on the bottom of a baking dish. I arrange the nests of tagliatelle. On each nest I put a good amount of sauce, a nice chunk of soft cheese, and on each nest a generous sprinkle of grana or parmesan. Then I cover with aluminum foil and bake at 180 degrees Celsius in a conventional oven for 45 to 50 minutes. And here it is. Let's take a look. Oh my, a delicious and budget-friendly recipe. Oven roasted pork loin with new potatoes. Make this goodness with me. Let's get started. So first of all, I'll prepare the vegetable broth. So in the water, I add the carrots, celery, and onion. Then I add a bit of salt and let it boil for 30 to 35 minutes. In the meantime, after peeling and rinsing the potatoes, new potatoes. By the way, I remind you that my two cookbooks are available only on Amazon. Just search for Carlo Gaiano and you'll receive them in at most 2 days. I blanch them in slightly salted water for 7 to 8 minutes. Then I drain them in cold water to stop the cooking. And now in a pan, I add some extra virgin olive oil, and once it's hot, I put in the pork loin and brown it on all sides for about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I season the potatoes with oil, a bit of salt, a little pepper, a little garlic powder, and mix well. Now I transfer the meat to a baking dish. Then I add a good amount of the blanched vegetables, a couple of ladles of broth, and then I pour in a glass of dry white wine. I put everything in the preheated oven and cook for 30 to 35 minutes at 220 degrees Celsius in static mode, adding more vegetable broth only if needed. Halfway through cooking, I switch the position of the baking dishes, turn the meat, add a bit of rosemary, a clove of garlic cut in half, and put it back in the oven. Perfect. Now I let the meat cool down a bit on a rack. Then I transfer the vegetables, the broth, and the meat juices into the blender cup. And then I blend everything together. Cut it into rather thin slices, drizzle with the sauce. Hot, let's see. Oh my, this stuffed meatloaf with cheese, spinach, and cooked ham is a real delight. Make it with me, let's get started. So first of all, I parboil the potatoes for at least 15 minutes. Then I put a bit of oil in a small pan or a little pot. Then I add some chopped onion. And then once it's sauteed, I add the cubes of spinach and cook them for about 10 minutes so they melt. The potatoes and spinach are cooked. They're already ready and cooled down. So in a bowl, I put the pork, the beef or veal. Then I add the chopped parsley. I add the salt, the eggs, which I always crack one at a time separately. Then I add a bit of pepper. I add the boiled potatoes, the grated Parmigiano or Grana cheese. Then I add the nutmeg, a little bit of garlic powder. Then I add the bread that was previously soaked and squeezed. And once everything is in, I start mashing first with a fork and then, for convenience, with a potato masher. Okay, now I put the mixture on a sheet of parchment paper. Flatten it well until I form a nice rectangle. And once I have a nice rectangle, I add the cooked ham, leaving at least 2 to 3 centimeters of space on the two short sides and at least 4 to 5 centimeters of space on the long sides. So I add the spinach that I squeezed well, then I put the scamorza cheese cut into thin slices and roll it up, using the paper to help me shape it. Here we go. I seal the short sides well, closing it like a candy, tightening it firmly, and I put it in the fridge for at least an hour, turning it from time to time so it doesn't take on just one shape. Perfect. Once I take it out of the fridge, I sprinkle some breadcrumbs on top, add a bit of extra virgin olive oil, massage it a little, then put it in a preheated oven and bake at 180 degrees Celsius for 50 minutes in static mode. Here it is. Let's take a look now. I'll slice it. Oh my. Today I'm making spinach with butter and parmesan with you, and I'll be using frozen spinach. Make this recipe with me. It's delicious. Let's get started. So, first of all, in a small pan or pot, I put the spinach cubes to thaw. It will take about 15 minutes. In the meantime, I peel an onion, cut off a piece, and chop it up nice and thin. Then I cut the parmesan and grate it. Now, in a pan, I melt the butter, then add the onion. And let it saute lightly. After that, I add the spinach. I stir a bit. Season with salt and cook on low heat for 45 minutes to let the flavors blend, stirring occasionally. Perfect. Now I turn off the heat. Add a good amount of parmesan right away. Mix well with a spoon and get ready to serve. Here we go. On top I add a little more parmesan. And now let's see. Put them on a bit of bread. Oh my, this classic apple pie is really within everyone's reach. Even kids can make it, and it's delicious. Make it with me. Let's get started. So first I peel the apples, then I clean out the insides, and then I cut them into rather thin slices. Then once I've cut them all, I pour some lemon juice over them so they don't turn brown. Then I mix them and set them aside. Now I separate the yolks from the whites, beat the egg whites until stiff. Okay, and set them aside. And in another bowl, I combine the sugar with the yolks, mix well, Then add the softened butter and beat with the mixer. Then I pour in the milk and mix well until the mixture is smooth. Then I add the flour little by little, the baking powder, and a bit of grated lemon zest, and give it a quick mix with the beaters. Then I pour in the egg whites, add the apples, mix everything well, then butter the cake pan on the bottom and the sides. I also dust it with a bit of flour. Now I pour in the mixture and smooth it out a bit. Then I put a few small pieces of butter here and there, put it in a preheated oven, and bake it in the center of the oven for 45 to 50 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius in static mode. By the way, to be on the safe side, don't use a springform pan like I did, but use a regular cake pan. And here it is. I sprinkle a bit of powdered sugar on top. Let's see. Oh my.